everyone. Welcome to another episode of She Builds Tech Skills North America. I'm Candace O'Hannon, and today I am joined by Brittany Wolfram. So she was one of my partners in our an episode just a couple weeks ago when we were at reInvent. It feels like it was like just a minute ago, but I think it's been 2 weeks now. I'm still kind of catching up. So thanks so much for being here with us today, Brittany. Really excited that you could join.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I cannot believe reInvent was already 2 weeks ago now, almost three. And we're this close to the holiday season, but excited to be here with you and to chat with the audience.
Absolutely. I feel like the end of the year just kind of like rushes by. Like reInvent happens and then it's just like scrambling to catch up, and then it's kind of the end of the year. So I feel like that's how it goes. Speaking of reInvent, it was a wonderful time. At least I think so. I love reInvent. I loved it as a customer. I love it as an employee. And it's so much fun. Like there's all the good learning all day long, and then there's the parties at night. And I think the thing that really like encapsulates all of that is always Werner Vogel's keynote. Like without a doubt, one of the best parts, right? I watched it just earlier today. Beautiful 2 hours of time spent as I'm catching up on everything else. And I think he had a really good couple of nuggets. I mean, a lot of good things. Like everybody go watch it. In fact, I have a little link here where you can go and watch his keynote if you would like to, if you have 2 hours of time to spare. But I really liked a few of his key points there. One of them, of course, we had a lot of announcements around Gen AI, of course, the hottest topic in the world right now, it feels like. And I really like the way Werner kind of approaches things. And so one of the quotes that he had in there was from Alan Turing, right? If you're a nerd on the line, like, you know, the Turing test, can machines really think? And with these large language models, I feel like that's becoming more of a question, more of a thing that we're kind of all considering. So I really liked that part of it. Brittany, did you get to watch that keynote as well?
I did. I think my favorite part is how it's always this like grand entrance, major kickoff. The energy levels go really high. So love the fact of the energy that it brings, and it goes by in the blink of an eye. The 2 hours really, it doesn't feel like 2 hours. But I think not one of my favorite things is not everything needs to be done with an LLM. Like that is very true. And I think that we all kind of got into this beginning, at least I did, working in generative AI. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it has to be. And then when you start actually working into it, you see more and more areas of opportunity where you're like, it doesn't have to be, but it can be.
Yeah.
And I just personally love the AI predictions because, yes, it is always learning and always learning from us. But I think it's interesting how much and how quickly everything is growing and how much we can use it in our everyday world. Like I can't tell you a day that I haven't used one of our models or one of our tools that's powered by AI.
Yeah, a little secret that I've told internally is that a lot of times those flyers that we create and put on LinkedIn, a lot of those summaries come straight from our Titan model. So rather than trying to come up with that myself, I can just have Titan do that bit for me. So that's always helpful.
It's also awesome to write your email. So I always struggle with how I want to simplify my emails for our executive audience. So I always run it through there as well, to kind of help with running that and getting everything generated. So many use cases.
Absolutely. And I think too, another thing that Werner said in his presentation that I really liked is that AI predicts and professionals decide. So yeah, we're going to run it through these models and it's going to write up your email, but then you should still really review that and make sure that it is delivering the message that you want it to deliver. So I thought that was a really good bit of information there as well.
Yeah, it gives you your draft one or what you would call draft 2, V2, whatever you want to call it, but it really just gives you the baseline to then create and develop from there as the professional.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyone on watching us right now, maybe if you've used an LLM or one of these Gen AI applications or have questions about them, feel free to just drop those in the chat and maybe we can talk about those as well. Also, another Wernerism, kind of switching the topic from Gen AI. This is one of my favorite things that he always says, besides now go build. He says everything breaks all the time. I love that. We need to design knowing that it's gonna break. It all breaks all the time. So how do we design for resiliency? How do we design with cost in mind and flexibility and things like that? I think that one of the things that I'm excited about in the interview that we're going to show here in just a few minutes with Stacy and Mrudula from Mutual of Omaha is how they've really been able to continue to reinvent and evolve their architecture. That's one of my favorite things that we're going to see here in a few minutes whenever we play that.
I think it's really interesting you bring up a point that everything breaks. I think about earlier in my career how nervous I would be every time we went into testing, and I'm like, something's going to break. Now, being 15 years in, if something doesn't break in testing, I am more anxious and more nervous than ever before. And
Yeah.
it's like creating that level of resiliency is so much more important after having those, we'll call it trips or bumps in the road along the process. So it is kind of crazy from that standpoint. But there is a couple things I think we should still highlight before we jump into the interview. But one of the things I wanted to chat a little bit about is building evolving architectures and making sure that we can evolve without affecting our customers and our end users. I think it's truly important to see how much we can do while still innovating and driving forward with minimal impacts to the customers every day. I don't know about you, but I am attached to technology. Between work, GPS, driving somewhere, I'm always using my phone, navigating on vacation, emails. I feel like we're so interconnected now. So from a end user perspective, we have to evolve architectures, but we have to have minimal downtime or no downtime from the end user experience. And that was one of the things I thought was pretty important. And we'll hear a little bit more about how that impacts our ladies in their roles shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of these quotes and like key topics that we're mentioning come from, I thought it was a book, but it's actually a web page where you can go find more information that Werner just published, and it's called The Frugal Architect. And so he has these, I don't know, 6 or 10 laws, or really like guidelines is really what they should be called, for how you can really build this cost-aware, resilient architecture, which is what he's all about. So you can go check it out there at thefrugalarchitect.com. In his presentation, he also talks a bit about NFRs, those non-functional requirements. And Stacy talks about those here in a few minutes too. She's one of the leaders of the platform teams at Mutual of Omaha, and she talks about how do you incorporate those NFRs, non-functional requirements, like security, compliance, maintainability, scalability. And then Werner goes on to add also cost and sustainability, which kind of go hand in hand, especially when you consider the cost model for, you only pay for what you use. So cost and sustainability really do go hand in hand with your AWS workloads. So yeah, I thought I loved that. I hope everyone goes and watches that. Anything else that kind of resonated with you, Brittany, or should we play the our interview?
I think we should jump into the interview and get into our conversations.
Awesome. Okay, so here is a conversation that we had with Stacy and Mrudula. We're going to go ahead and play this, and then we'll come back for additional commentary. And welcome to another episode of She Builds Tech Skills North America. I'm Candace Bohannon, and I'm a solutions architect at AWS. We've got a really fun and exciting episode today with some ladies from Mutual of Omaha. And before we introduce them, I'd like to introduce my co-host, MJ. Would you like to tell the audience who you are?
Yes, absolutely. Happy to be here. I'm MJ Zulueta. I'm a customer solutions leader here at AWS.
Great. So glad to be doing this with you again, MJ.
Yes.
And our esteemed guests today are from Mutual of Omaha. They both work in the information system space, and we're going to be doing a technical deep dive of some of what they've implemented for their telephony modernization efforts that they've deployed on AWS. Stacy Skradsky, the leader of the DevOpsy things at Mutual of Omaha. She'll tell you a little bit more about what exactly she does, as well as Mrudula, who is more on the application side. So would you guys like to go ahead and introduce yourselves, tell us what you do at Mutual of Omaha, and how you got interested in technology in general?
Thank you for having me here, Candice and MJ. My name is Mrudula. I am the IS manager and technology owner for the team that supports Mutual of Omaha's call center applications. As a technology owner, I lead my team to promote technology modernization efforts. Prior to this role, I was working as the technical lead in the same team. I started my career as a developer and built my career towards technical leadership. I am in this IT field for 23 years now and worked with different technologies like Oracle, Teradata, Informatica, Big Data, and now currently the AWS cloud technologies. In this information technology field, there are a lot of opportunities. Personally, doing what we do in our call center application made me realize what customer service is about. So there's always potential for growth because of the opportunities, and maybe that's what interested me in getting into this field.
Very cool. How about you, Stacy? How did you end up where you are today?
Oh, well, by accident, if I'm being honest. So about 20 some years ago, I was in a QA department for a company that creates lists. And that QA department for the list happened to be very close, right next door actually to the IT department. And it is amazing what that proximity did. I always found myself optimizing constantly the things we were doing in the QA for our list department. And it became common knowledge of some of the things that I did. And I happened to sit next to the IT groups. And so we started discussing things. And eventually I started a role as a software QA, and then a business analyst, and then project manager, then program manager. And it just continued to grow. And I stay interested this whole time. I've been interested. It's something I fell into accidentally, but I have never looked back.
That's awesome. I like it when we have different approaches, different ways, paths to get to where we're going. So accidents are a good thing sometimes.
Very, very happy accident.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and start to talk about what you guys are doing at Mutual of Omaha and how you're doing it with AWS. Let's talk about how you're using Amazon Connect and kind of walk through your high level architecture. So Mrudula, can you kind of walk us through what's happening here?
I'll go back 5 years now. So back in 2017, we were trying to have a better contact center experience, and information services area was engaged to help with the business problem. And after evaluating some options, we made a decision to go with AWS Connect. So this is Mutual's first AWS cloud application, and Connect was also released around the same time. When we first started, we had no expertise or skill sets with any of these AWS services. So we had to use a third party to help us with this migration for over a short period of time. We built all the IVRs, or the interactive voice response call flows, to replace our legacy contact center, and Lambdas to integrate with the call flows. And it was all on the job learning. Within a year, we were able to migrate most of our contact centers from legacy to Connect and run most of our contact centers on AWS Connect. And when you look at this architecture diagram, you have Amazon Connect as part of our ecosystem, and that's where the call comes in. And when the call comes in, there's Lambda functions that we integrated within our contact flow or the call routing process. So for instance, when a call comes in, the first check we do is to make sure that our contact center that they're calling is open. And if it is open, we play a prompt. And for that, we use Dynamo database where all our messages or prompts are stored. As part of our ID and authentication, we also use API gateways. And what this does is go and interact with our backend processors or on-prem services that go and fetch the data that is needed. The main services here that we use, for instance, Lex or Dynamo, are basically for that interactive conversation with the customer, and the Dynamo mainly for data storage that is needed as part of our call routing. And when you look at the architecture diagram, you also see some of the third-party services that we leverage here. For instance, as with any contact center application, workforce management and quality management is a must. And we do leverage Kibana for our real-time dashboards. We use Kibana to make sure that the average handle time is being noticed, and also eventually we try to reduce the average handle time.
Yeah, and I love seeing the back end of how contact center works. When I used to work for a contact center like 10 years ago, I don't think that our architecture is this sophisticated. Now, I'm gonna double click quickly on LexBots. So, I heard that you're using Lex. Can you tell me more about the reason why you chose Lex and the capabilities that you love about it that suits your business needs?
Lex is a conversational service bot from AWS. It is an artificial intelligence service that understands the intent of the customer or the caller. It offers advanced speech recognition and has natural language understanding that helps interpret the customer's requests or utterances. When we first planned to implement our call center on Amazon Connect, we wanted to offer an automated voice recognition and natural language understanding technology solution. With AWS Lex, we did not have to worry about scalability or infrastructure. It is easy to build, test, and deploy because AWS has a console that it offers. So it has built-in integration with other AWS services, as well as it's easy to integrate within our call flows as well. And of course, it is cost-effective solution. We implemented Lex so that we can enable more self-service capabilities within our call center applications. We have well over 20 plus LexBots within our CCaaS platform that are integrated within the call flows for various business functionalities. With Lex, we reduced call volumes to the frontline associates by improving self-service capabilities, as it reduces load on our call center reps, as the bot can handle the initial interaction with the customer and collect some data that is needed for the call to be routed to the right representative or the right queue.
That's awesome. And I know that contact center has to be active all the time. So how do you make sure your customers always have access to their portals?
So during the open hours or after the call center closes, if I want to make a payment, I can call the 1-800 number, ID and authenticate myself, and do not have to wait for a customer service representative to handle this for me. So we also implemented digital IVR a few years back. So with this, we have a Call Me Now feature on our mutualofomaha.com page. So when a caller requests a call back, it triggers outbound call from the IVR to the caller. There is some information we do request on this page from the caller so that the call is routed to the right queue. This way, the caller does not have to call and wait. We do have callback functionality for a subset of our business units as well. So with this, when a caller calls and if there is a long queue wait time, we offer callback. That way, they do not have to wait on the line for the next available representative. And now, as of June 2023, we also implemented the global resiliency or multi-region redundancy, as we call here at Mutual. So this will ensure calls are received and answered even if our services is one of our regions has an outage. Mm-hmm. We can fail over within a few minutes and still keep our phone systems up and running. We are constantly working on enhancing our contact center so that we reduce the average handle waiting times to have an improved customer experience as well.
I like hearing about all of that, all of the things that you do to make sure stuff is up. And I think that is a nice segue into talking a little bit more about what I call the DevOpsy things. And Stacy, that's your jam. So let's talk to us a little bit about how you approach DevOps, your architecture patterns, infrastructure as code, automation, all of those kind of hot topics. Tell us some things, Stacy.
So I have the opportunity to lead in the platform engineering department here for cloud services at Mutual of Omaha. And I have two teams, and those are we call them collectively the CCOE, or a Cloud Center of Excellence. Those Cloud Center of Excellence, it's broken down into two more teams. So we're further bifurcating the work just to make sure that we're really focusing on our specialties and areas. So we have two teams. One team is our CBO and emergent team, and they're responsible for AWS account provisioning, onboarding, and our financial aspects. The team we're going to talk about a lot today is the service enablement team, and they are responsible for the entire machine that exists with our service enablement process to make sure that at Mutual of Omaha, we're really leveraging the public cloud in the most secure fashion, but still able to take advantage of all of the efficiencies that you get in a public cloud, the ability to leverage the new services and have them be managed for you, the lack of having to own your own version upgrades, having that layer taken care of in infrastructure is amazing. But then when we expand that out to our application development teams, our pure focus is figuring out how do we help our development teams move forward faster without creating a bunch of chaos and sprawl. And so for that, we have our service enablement process. Do you want to pull up that workflow so we can walk through how that goes?
Sure.
The service enablement process is a really big group effort, but this workflow engine helps make sure that we're building the appropriate services, that we are crafting config rules and automating our governance and making sure that we understand how we're staying compliant. And I'll walk through that just a little bit more at a time. It all starts with any team who is working in IS that would like to leverage an AWS service that we don't already have enabled. So I would say at this point, I think AWS has, was it 250 or 350 services? A lot. Yes, a lot of them. I would say at Mutual of Omaha, we have enabled or made GA 102 to 104 of those services. There's a little bit of a caveat there when we say 104 services, though, because when we look at what AWS CDK provides, we can actually create a construct that's many constructs can support one service. So, okay, this starts off, there's an application development team, and they say, maybe it's Mrudula's team. And she says to me, hey, Lexbot 2.0 is coming out. If we instead think about Lexbot and talk about it as in the first time Lex was being used at Mutual of Omaha, what would have happened is Mrudula and her team would have came to the governance board. So not even just my team at all, but to the technical leadership and said, hey, we would really like to leverage Lexbot. And we just heard all of the amazing things Lexbot does. What happens is her team will ask the leadership, and the leadership will take a look at the AWS CDK documentation. So we look at how the service could be used, what we would like to do with the service, and we decide, is this really the service that we want to bring? Is the service fit for our future architectural vision for the company? Then we'll have a group of technologists go through and they will craft our NFRs, our non-functional requirements. Now, these non-functional requirements, again, come from the AWS CDK documentation and a lot of the security governance expertise and guidance out there that say, here are all of the possible configurations and settings that you can use in Lex. And then we'll draft all of our non-functional requirements and we'll say, yep, this is great. This is how we're going to govern the use of this service. And Mrudula and her team or the application development team will say, yeah, this works for us too. These rules are not so strict that they're going to damage our ability to build our project the way we want to. And sometimes there can be some negotiation there. This is a joint effort, but we really do want to take that deep dive and investigate whether we're going to use the service appropriately at front. As we get farther down the process, we do have ways of updating those and making sure that we're not just saying that's how it is. Let's call it a day. So after our NFRs are all defined and we're all okay with the NFRs, we will not block the AWS service from being deployed into a Mutual of Omaha environment. We like to add our governance in such a way where we're codifying it and automating it. We want to give as close to real-time feedback, especially on things like security and compliance, to our development teams right away, even in our CI/CD toolchain. So as it sits today, if a service is in beta, you will not be blocked from deploying that service into a non-production environment. And there's a lot of working in beta. So it takes a while, because what we then do is we codify all of those NFRs, the non-functional requirements, the table of properties that you can and you cannot do. We codify those as config rules. So when we say a beta service, what we mean is we're creating our own CDK construct, and we are also configuring that construct so that it meets the compliance of every single one of those NFRs. What we then have is actually a template, so that when it becomes GA, they can go to our CDK library, and then they can clone or fork into their library, and they will have a base template. So not only do we build the config rules that will govern the service usage in an automated fashion, we also provide the development teams with the templates where they are already configured in a way where you don't have to do anything but add your business logic. Everything else is going to be the way it needs to be for you to develop.
It's so amazing what you do in Mutual of Omaha. And you guys are very detailed too with your processes, so we love it. A lot of people would be learning a lot from this session, and I'm sure that everyone listening to us today would like to hear your advice. If there is one thing you wish you knew when you first started your career in tech, what would that be?
I would say not to be afraid of or stressed about change. Technology is changing rapidly, and you cannot be an expert all the time in everything. There will always be something to learn, especially if you want to stay on top in this field. And also, you need to have peers to whom you can go to for feedback and support, and a mentor that can guide you and coach you on your career path. I wish I built better networking, and I wish I had mentors from the time I first started.
I could probably still use a mentor or two. I think, I mean, at all times in your career. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that one thing that I wish I knew more when I first started this is that nobody knows what they're doing. Nobody knows what they're doing. There's not a single technology that is done. It's what's beautiful about it, but also very, very scary and daunting. At no point will you ever know everything you need to know in order to become an expert. The thing is you don't have to wait until you know everything to get started. Like, you can still go even though you don't know everything. It's gonna be okay. And anything that you learned halfway in the beginning, that's already going to be changed to the next thing, and everybody will be learning that thing, and then you'll all be back on the same page. So don't wait to get started in this until you know everything. Don't wait to apply for the job until you know that you can fill every single one of the bullet points. Don't wait to take the class until you know you've got the prereqs down by heart. Just jump in and go, and it's fun.
Yeah.
Very well said. Yep.
I think that's really great. It's kind of a thing that I know, like historically, women tend to do a little bit more than men. So I think that advice about just take the first step. You don't need to know the whole path, but build that castle and head to where you're trying to go. And also getting the feedback from mentors, like finding people at all levels of our career. We need mentors. We need people who can help us. So I think that is very helpful for our viewers, for me too. So thank you both so much for being here today. We definitely learned a lot about how to use Lexbots and how Amazon Connect works in the background, infrastructure as code, and really developing these like platform engineering, CCOE type of teams in large environments where you can deploy very important and scalable, resilient things for your customers. So I think this was very interesting, and really want to thank you for your time today. So thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having us here.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you soon. All right. So that was our interview. MJ and I did that a couple weeks ago, and I really enjoyed it. I really like hearing about people's work path, the accidental falling into technology just through proximity is beautiful. I really like that. And also, we had a question from the group or from our audience, and it is, could you please share a roadmap to becoming a professional architect? And so I thought that was a really good key thing to kind of like point out here. So to answer this question, we actually have a couple of guests that we're going to invite back. So, yay, welcome back, Stacy and Mrudula. Hello, hello.
Hi.
Thanks so much for joining us back. So, loved your interview. It was really good. And maybe you saw that question that I just posted up there. What was your roadmap to becoming a professional? I'm going to say software architect. I'm going to add that in parentheses. That's what we're talking about here. Stacy, you want to tackle that one? What did you do to get to where you are?
Yeah. So I want to say the good news and bad news is, for me, for other people, the good news is technically I'm not an architect right now. The great news is that throughout my decades now of experience, what I can say after promoting and witnessing and working with some of the best software architects, that the key attributes and roles are pretty consistent with software architecture. The biggest key part of the roadmap is establishing a tenure of understanding what solutions do work and what solutions don't work. The best part about software architecture is that other teams and developers will lean on you and your guidance and experience to understand what the best path forward is, which leads me to, I would say, the second most important attribute, and that is the ability to build those relationships. Because if you are a software architect, it's not as much your hands on the keyboard and you're more influencing other teams to take your word for it, that the suggestions and architectures that you're proposing and providing, along with other guidance, are worthwhile. So it's not a short path, but there's a reason for that. And that's because it's a very, very high expectation, wonderful role.
Yeah. I am a solutions architect. And the way that I got here, I like to say that I'm a Jill of all trades, but really a master of one or five. But I'm not really like super deep in any one area. I have a few things that I like, but just knowing a little bit about everything, because an architect really has to put together the walls and the ceiling and the plumbing. Like you have to have an understanding of all of those things so that you can build a whole house. So that was one of the things that I would add to what you said.
That is my only other dream role besides the one I have now.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the question was asked because we actually have a coffee chat coming up with our AWS Solutions Architecture team this Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. EST, where they're going to dive into the role and how they got into their role and the variety of the panel of women and allies. So it'll be a great opportunity if you want to hear more to kind of dive into that. I know we could probably spend another hour plus just talking about the specifics of that. And I always think it's extremely intriguing with how much solutions architects do and how much they know. Being that I get to work with a ton of them all the time, it's an ever learning role. That's the best way I think I've been able to describe it. Ever learning, always learning, kind of diving into it. Awesome. And then the little post went up. So if you want to grab that link, feel free to join us on Friday.
There we go.
So I know I have a couple other questions. I don't know, Candace, if you had a couple other questions, if you wanted to go first or if I should
go first. Yeah.
Awesome. So I know we have a common question that we like to ask on the channel that everyone loves to hear more about. So I would just love to know if either of you have experienced any type of imposter syndrome in your IT profession and kind of like how you've overcame it or how you've been able to work through it. Because I know as a woman in tech, that is always something I'm always asking my mentors and others to be able to grow and develop myself. So
Yeah. Yes. So I will say yes, definitely. For sure, in my initial days of my career, yes, I did have, the fear of failure, for instance, right? Everyone surrounding me were all experienced developers, very smart people, whereas I was starting my career like with zero hands-on experience. Um, so yes, I did have that. I did have the feeling that I might fail or I doubted sometimes on my capability or the ability or right to grasp technology, for instance. But then I challenged myself basically to learn and grow, because one thought I had is, at some point of time, this experienced developer also had the same, right, path. Like, they started somewhere from scratch, just like me. So when I had that thought, I challenged myself to learn and grow slowly. And one thing I did do is, acknowledging my own accomplishments. Does not matter how small that accomplishment is, acknowledging my own accomplishment, that gave me confidence. So it helped me get out of that fear mode. Um, and another thing is, always being curious and challenging myself to be open to the change, because in this field, change is so rapid that you always have to have that curious mindset, and you always have to be open to learning and growing as well. So that's how I overcame some of the fear as well.
I would say, to tag on to what Mrudula said, I go through imposter syndrome frequently. And that's because I take big risks and I want to put myself in situations where I'm learning and growing. And so when I think of imposter syndrome, I think of it as my cue. That's my emotional cue to help me focus in and hone in. Is it an imposter syndrome because I don't feel like I know enough? Well, I can learn more and I can really hone in on what I do know and feel confident and take those big wins. And then sometimes you can get imposter syndrome when you're working in new groups of people or in team dynamics, where certain team dynamics or conversations can cause you to feel like an imposter in your role. And it's really important, because it happens often when you're in a meeting. Maybe your peers are doing something way better than you, or maybe something just flew completely over your head, that you remember, just like Mrudula said, just hone in on your small wins, on your knowledge. Imposter syndrome, it's not pleasant, but it can also be a cue for where you need growth to come through, but only if you acknowledge and realize that imposter syndrome doesn't mean you're not really supposed to be where you are. You're always where you're supposed to be at.
Yeah.
Very well said.
The nuggets that I would put there for our leadership principles, because we got to talk about leadership principles. I can't help but say them all the time. It's all about learn and be curious. I also just posted this in the chat back on the comments. Like, you can't know everything. You don't need to know 200 and bajillion services, the 200 plus services that we have today, before you apply. Like, just jump in and give it a try. But I would also say some people are asking questions about which services do you frequently require in your implementations. And so I'll start it and then I'll let you guys talk too. But I used to say, when I was a developer, when I was a customer, I would say that I could do just about anything with an S3 bucket and some Lambdas. Like, that's where you start, right? And then add on complicated things as you go through. So those are some that you just got to know. Maybe EC2 instances, but I'm a serverless girl myself, so I try to avoid those. What would you guys add? Anything? What's your favorite service or something you couldn't live without?
So prior to this role into management, one of my favorite is the Lex and the Lambdas, just because my team is Amazon Connect, and we create all IVR or call routing for all the call centers that Mutual has. Lex and Lambdas are the main services that I use to integrate within the call flows, and I used to love those two services for sure. Of course, S3 is definitely needed, so I do agree with S3 as well. Yeah.
I love what you said. It's like the MacGyver toolkit with, you can do anything with S3 and a Lambda.
Yeah.
I would agree. I have seen progress, advancement, even if you have to change something in your application because it didn't go correctly, just the ability to move and deploy and figure out what you're working with and how to adjust your logic within your application has been made so much quicker with the advancements of serverless.
Yeah, removing some of that undifferentiated heavy lifting, to use more of our phrasings, right? To just let you kind of focus on what actually matters, the little functions that do the work. So you can do so much with it. I'm also going to pop up here just real quick for those of you talking about careers and like how do you get a job and this and that sort of thing. Here's a link to the Mutual of Omaha careers page as well as their early careers page. I showed this in our last episode with Dawn Peelstick as well. She started as an intern at Mutual of Omaha and she's a VP of Amazing Awesomeness and Information Systems. Isn't that about right for her title? Something like that. So you know, we all start somewhere. Just you just gotta kind of keep looking.
Awesome. So
Go
I was
ahead.
going to say, I have one last question to lead us out because I know we're coming up on time. So one of the additional questions that we tend to ask quite a bit that I love to ask fellow leaders is, what motivated you to become a leader in technology? And I guess, Stacy, we'll head to you first for that one.
What motivated me to become a leader in technology was the beautiful atmosphere that I got to be a part of whenever we tackled an impossible problem. And with engineering, it's always an impossible problem that you can't. And I love every single day coming to the table and just working in that atmosphere of, we don't know how to do it. How do we do this? Here are the tools in our bucket, and just watching things grow. That's every day.
That's exciting too. It's like the Jenga puzzle that never ends.
Exactly.
You come into a new piece or a new product that you're like, okay, we have a new problem, but a
Yes.
problem's an opportunity.
I'm
Love
not
that.
suited for boredom. Not suited for boredom at all over here.
Mrudula, what would you say yours would be?
Mine to get into leadership is the passion. Actually, I like mentoring and coaching people. So, be it technology, be it anything, right? I like mentoring and coaching people. So that's what made me switch my career into this position. So, yeah,
That's awesome. Having a passionate leader, there's like no other way to describe the magic that happens on a team where the leader is just as passionate as the team is. We've all had a bad manager experience, I'm sure. We've all had a great manager experience. And I think it comes down to that passion, that problem solving, what you both are collectively talking about. So as always, the session has to come to an end, which is not always the fun part of this. But I think to close us out, I would love to highlight a couple things that you all said that kind of just resonated with me and would keep me going. So I think the first and foremost is just celebrating the small wins. I don't think we do that enough in life in general. And if we could celebrate the small wins, it helps with a lot of things, whether it's imposter syndrome or just celebrating the small thing on a bad day. It could really turn you around. And then I would say just jumping into it. It seems like both of you have just jumped into something in some point in your career and just take the risk. It's not failing, it's failing forward is always the term I've used. So it's like you have to fail in order to take that step forward. You might have to take 2 steps back to take 5 steps forward, but you're moving in that momentum that you really want. And it's okay to deep dive into the why and deep dive and understand like why you're feeling the imposter syndrome or why you're having that technical error or what is happening from that standpoint. And I think we could all agree that we love S3 buckets for some reason or another. We start with it, we grow with it, and we have our Lex and our Lambdas to go right along with it. So I want to thank you both for the time. It's around the holiday season, so for you to give up the time to both do the recording and then join us live is always a pleasure for us and the viewers that are on here today. And I will say thank you and happy holidays from us to you, and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.